When I first moved into the neighborhood, I was not expecting trouble. After 15 years with Homeland Security, I had seen enough conflict to last a lifetime. My wife Sarah and I purchased the old Miller property on the edge of Oak Ridge Estates specifically for its privacy, the 2 acres of land, and that beautiful half-dilapidated barn I planned to restore. The previous owners had let it fall into disrepair, but I could see its potential. Solid oak beams, high ceilings, and enough space to create something special. A workshop perhaps, or a gathering place for actual friends. Sarah loved the house itself. A 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch where she could place her rocking chairs and plant her flowers. After years of supporting my high-stress government work, moving from city to city, she deserved this peace. We both did. For the first week, it felt like we had found it. Our neighbors to the right, the Johnsons, brought over a homemade apple pie and welcomed us warmly. The elderly couple across the street waved whenever we checked the mail. Several families with children rode bikes past our driveway, and the parents smiled and nodded in greeting. It felt normal. It felt right. I noticed her on our 3rd day. A woman in her late 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair, standing across the street, watching our house through narrowed eyes. She held a small notebook and scribbled in it occasionally, never once offering a smile or wave. When I nodded in her direction, she turned away sharply and marched back to her house, a pristine white colonial with immaculate landscaping and not a single thing out of place. "That is Karen Winters," my neighbor Tom Johnson told me later. "She runs the Homeowners Association." Something in his voice made me pay attention. A subtle warning, perhaps, but I dismissed it. Every neighborhood had its characters. The following Saturday, I began work on the barn. I rented a pressure washer, bought lumber for repairs, and started the process of bringing it back to life. Sarah brought me lemonade around noon, and we were discussing paint colors when a sharp voice interrupted us. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you are doing?" Karen Winters stood at the edge of our property, arms crossed over her floral blouse, a clipboard clutched in one manicured hand. Her face was pulled into what might have been intended as a smile, but resembled something closer to a grimace. "Good afternoon," I said, extending my hand. "I am James Miller. This is my wife, Sarah. We are the new owners." She ignored my hand. "I am Karen Winters, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I do not see any approved permits for this construction work. All exterior modifications must be submitted in writing for board approval." Sarah stepped forward. "We are just cleaning and making necessary repairs. The structure already exists." Karen's eyes narrowed. "That barn is an eyesore that the previous owners were in the process of removing. We do not allow agricultural structures in Oak Ridge. It violates our aesthetic standards." I felt my jaw tighten but kept my voice level. "Actually, the barn is original to the property, predating the development. It is grandfathered in according to our deed and the county records. I checked before purchasing." Karen appeared momentarily startled but recovered quickly. "Nevertheless, the color, materials, and any changes must be approved. I will need detailed plans on my desk by Monday morning. We have standards here. People like you need to understand how things work around here." The way she said, "people like you," made my skin crawl. It was a tone I recognized from years of interrogations and field operations. The tone of someone establishing dominance, creating an enemy. "I appreciate your concern," I said calmly, "but I have already checked with the county. All of my renovations are within code and legal parameters. The HOA has limited jurisdiction over historical structures." Karen's face flushed. She clutched her clipboard tighter. "We will see about that. There are rules here, Mr. Miller, rules that everyone must follow." She looked pointedly at the lumber stacked nearby. "I would hate for you to waste money on materials that will never be approved." As she turned to leave, she paused and looked back with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Estates. I suggest you read the covenant carefully. Not everyone fits in here." As she walked away, Sarah gripped my arm. "James, what was that about?" I watched Karen's stiff posture as she returned to her house. "That," I said quietly, "was a declaration of war." The first official warning arrived 3 days later. a formal letter with the Oak Ridge Estates letterhead, citing violations of community standards. According to Karen, our pressure washing had created excessive noise pollution during unauthorized hours. The lumber I had stacked was an unsightly storage violation. Most absurdly, she claimed the barn itself represented an agricultural structure incompatible with our community aesthetic. The letter ended with a demand to cease all renovations immediately or face daily fines of $100. It was signed not by a board, but by Karen alone. "This is ridiculous," Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. "Can she actually do this?" I folded the letter carefully. "No, she cannot. I reviewed the HOA documents thoroughly before we bought this place. The barn is exempt from most restrictions due to its historical status." But Karen was just warming up. The next day, another letter arrived, this one claiming our exterior house paint was non-compliant with approved color schemes. Our house was the original colonial blue it had been for decades. When I tried to speak with other neighbors about the situation, I noticed a disturbing pattern. They would become uncomfortable, make excuses, and quickly end conversations. Tom Johnson, who had been friendly initially, now barely made eye contact when I waved. "She has them terrified," Sarah observed one evening as we watched a neighbor hurry inside when Karen emerged from her house. "What has she done to these people?" I decided to attend the monthly HOA meeting to address the harassment directly. The gathering was scheduled at the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. I arrived early, professional folder in hand with all our documentation. But when I approached the door, Karen stood blocking the entrance. "This is a closed meeting for members in good standing only," she announced loudly. "I am a member," I replied calmly. "I own property here." "Members under violation citations are not permitted to attend until their issues are resolved." Her smile was venomous. "Rules are rules, Mr. Miller." Several board members behind her looked away uncomfortably. No one challenged her. As I turned to leave, I overheard her speaking to another woman. "He has a military background, you know. These veterans can be unstable, violent even. We need to be cautious." My blood ran cold. I had never mentioned my background to anyone in the neighborhood. And while I had served briefly in the military before joining Homeland Security, I had never once had any issues with anger or violence. She was deliberately painting me as dangerous. That night, Sarah suggested we take a different approach. Maybe we should just follow her rules for now, paint the house an approved color, take down the barn. It might not be worth the fight. I looked at my wife, this woman who had supported me through everything, who deserved peace and happiness. But I also thought about the neighbors, all seemingly under Karen's thumb, afraid to speak out. "No," I said finally. "If we give in, she wins, and she will not stop there. People like her never do. They take and take until there is nothing left." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. "Nothing dramatic," I assured her. "Just gather information, build a case, the same way I would handle any investigation." In the following weeks, I installed security cameras around our property, documenting everything. I researched HOA laws extensively. I requested financial records from the Homeowners Association, which was my legal right as a member. Each request was denied or lost mysteriously. Karen escalated her campaign. Citations appeared daily. Anonymous complaints about noise, about our garbage cans being visible, about the length of our grass being a quarter-inch too long. Other neighbors began receiving similar notices if they were seen speaking to us. Then the rumors started. Parents pulled their children away when they rode bikes near our house. An elderly neighbor crossed the street to avoid walking past our property. We became pariahs without ever knowing exactly what was being said about us. "She is trying to isolate us," I told Sarah, "make us the enemy." What Karen did not realize was that she had chosen the wrong target. I had spent my career identifying threats, gathering intelligence, and neutralizing dangerous situations. I would not be intimidated. I would be patient, and I would document everything. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Sarah had gone to visit her sister for the weekend, leaving me alone to continue work on the barn. I had made significant progress despite Karen's interference. The structure was now sound, the exterior restored to its original glory, and the inside partially renovated with new flooring and lighting. I had just finished my morning coffee when I noticed something strange. Cars were pulling up along the street near our property. Women in sundresses and heels were walking toward our backyard, carrying dishes and wine bottles. Confused, I stepped outside to investigate. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. Through the open barn door, I could see tables set up with white tablecloths. Flower arrangements adorned each surface. Strings of lights had been hung from the rafters, my rafters. Music played from a portable speaker. At least 15 women milled about inside my barn, laughing and pouring wine. In the center of it all stood Karen, wearing a pink dress and pearls, directing people where to place things. I approached slowly, processing what I was seeing. They had broken in through the side door where the lock was still being repaired. They had decorated my private property. They were hosting some kind of event without my knowledge or permission. "Excuse me," I said loudly, stepping into the doorway. "What is happening here?" The women turned, conversations halting abruptly. Karen looked over with an expression of mild annoyance, as if I were the intruder. "Oh, James," she said with exaggerated patience. "This is the monthly ladies' wine and book club. We always use the community barn for our gatherings." "Community barn?" I repeated. "This is my private property. You have broken into my barn without permission." Karen laughed, the sound brittle and forced. "Do not be ridiculous. This barn is designated as a community space under Section 5 of the HOA agreement. Previous owners always allowed its use for neighborhood functions." Several women nodded in agreement, though I noticed uncertainty in some of their eyes. "That is completely false," I stated firmly. "There is no such provision in the HOA agreement. This barn belongs to me and you are all trespassing. I need everyone to leave immediately." "We have reservations about your aggressive tone," Karen said, voice rising. "Ladies, this is exactly the concerning behavior I mentioned." I took a deep breath, maintaining control. "I am not being aggressive, I am stating facts. You have entered my property without permission. That is trespassing and possibly breaking and entering. Everyone needs to leave now." Some of the women began gathering their belongings, looking uncomfortable. But Karen stepped forward, placing herself between me and the group. "We are not going anywhere," she hissed, her pleasant facade dropping. "This event has been planned for months. If you continue to harass us, there will be consequences." "This is my property," I repeated, moving toward the impromptu bar they had set up on my workbench. "I did not give permission for this event." As I reached to turn off their music, Karen lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "Do not touch anything." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Karen, this has gone far enough. Please take your guests and leave now, or I will need to call the sheriff." She stepped back, eyes wild with rage. "He just assaulted me," she shrieked suddenly. "Did everyone see that? He attacked me." The women gasped, some backed away toward the door, others pulled out phones. "I did not touch you," I said calmly. "There are security cameras recording everything." Karen's eyes darted to the corners of the barn, noticing for the first time the small cameras I had installed after the initial confrontations. For a moment, doubt flickered across her face. Then she pulled out her phone. "I am calling 911, she announced. "This man is dangerous. He has assaulted me and is threatening a group of defenseless women." Before I could respond, she was speaking into her phone, voice trembling with manufactured fear. "Please help. A man is threatening us. He attacked me. We need police immediately." Some of the women began hurrying out, wine glasses still in hand. Others stood frozen, uncertain what to do. Karen continued her performance for the 911 operator, describing me as unstable and violent, claiming I had pushed her. I remained perfectly still, hands visible at my sides. I knew better than to speak or move during her call. Years of training had taught me how to handle volatile situations. I would let the authorities arrive. I would present evidence calmly. And Karen would discover that she had severely underestimated me. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived within 15 minutes. By then, most of the women had scattered, leaving only Karen and 3 of her closest friends standing in my driveway. Karen was still in full victim mode, dabbing at non-existent tears with a lace handkerchief. When the officers approached, she rushed toward them dramatically. "Thank goodness you are here. That man," she pointed at me with a shaking finger, "attacked me in his barn when I was hosting our community event. He pushed me and threatened all of us." The deputies looked at me, hands instinctively moving toward their weapons. I remained still, expression neutral, hands visible. "Sir," the older deputy said, "we need you to step over here and explain what happened." "Of course, officer," I replied calmly. "My name is James Miller. I own this property. I discovered these women had broken into my barn and were hosting an unauthorized event. When I asked them to leave, Ms. Winters became confrontational and then falsely claimed I assaulted her." "He is lying," Karen interjected. "The barn is community property according to HOA bylaws." I turned to the deputies. "I have my property deed and the complete HOA agreement right here." I gestured toward the folder on my porch. "May I retrieve them?" The younger deputy nodded, following me to the porch. I handed him the documents, including the section clearly stating that all structures on my property belonged exclusively to the homeowner. "Additionally," I said quietly, "I have security footage of the entire encounter. Ms. Winters and her friends broke the lock on my side door to gain entry. They brought alcohol onto my property without permission and refused to leave when instructed. At no point did I touch Ms. Winters except to remove her hand from my arm when she grabbed me." The deputy reviewed the documents, then spoke into his radio, requesting another officer to view the security footage. Karen was becoming increasingly agitated. "You cannot believe him. He is dangerous. Ask anyone in the neighborhood about his behavior. He has threatened multiple residents." The older deputy turned to her. "Ma'am, please calm down. We need to establish the facts." "The facts are that he assaulted me," she shrieked. "Ms. Winters," I said calmly, "you know that is not true. Everything is on camera." Her eyes narrowed. "Who exactly do you think you are? Do you know who I am in this community?" I considered my words carefully. "I am a homeowner who has been systematically harassed since moving in, and due to my previous employment, I am particularly sensitive to trespassing on my property." "Previous employment?" the older deputy asked. "I cannot discuss the details," I said quietly, "but I worked in federal law enforcement for 15 years, Homeland Security." Something shifted in both deputies' demeanor. The older one gave a slight nod of understanding. Karen caught the change, her eyes darting between us. "What does that matter?" she demanded. "He still attacked me." "We will review the security footage, ma'am," the younger deputy said. "In the meantime, I suggest everyone return to their homes." Karen was not giving up. "I want him arrested now." "Ma'am," the older deputy said firmly, "we will file a report on this incident, but based on the documentation and your conflicting statements, we are not making any arrests at this time." When they finally left, taking statements and copies of my security footage, Karen stood at the edge of my property, face contorted with rage. "This is not over," she hissed. "You have no idea who you are dealing with." I said nothing, simply watching as she stormed away. That evening, Tom Johnson came to my door, the first neighbor to approach me in weeks. "I saw what happened," he said quietly. "We all did. Some of us have been dealing with Karen for years. She forced the previous HOA president out when he challenged her authority. She has bullied half the neighborhood into submission with false violations and threats." "Why does no one stand up to her?" I asked. "Fear," he admitted. "She has friends in the county offices. She has gotten people fired from jobs, spread rumors that destroyed reputations. We just try to stay out of her way." As he left, he added, "Be careful she does not lose gracefully." I nodded, but inside, a plan was already forming. Karen wanted a war, but she had no idea who she was fighting. I had tracked cartel operations across borders. I had built cases against terrorists and traffickers. I had learned to gather intelligence methodically, thoroughly, and legally. That night, I began a detailed log of every interaction, every violation notice, every false claim. I set up additional cameras covering all angles of our property. I reached out to contacts who still owed me favors, requesting information on Oak Ridge Estate's HOA finances and operations. This was not about revenge. This was about justice. This was about protecting not just my family, but an entire neighborhood held hostage by one power-hungry woman. The evidence accumulated faster than I anticipated. Tom Johnson introduced me to former HOA board members who had been forced out when they questioned Karen's decisions. Each had stories of intimidation, manipulation, and outright lies. She convinced the board to hire her son's landscaping company at triple the market rate, one former treasurer confided. When I questioned the expense, she claimed I was sexually harassing her. I resigned rather than fight the accusation. Another showed me financial reports with discrepancies totaling thousands of dollars, maintenance fees that never resulted in actual maintenance, special assessments for projects that were never completed. Where did the money go? I asked. Her kitchen renovation, according to rumors, but no one could prove it. I requested official HOA financial records, which Karen had been legally required to provide but had lost repeatedly. This time, I made the request through a lawyer citing state statutes that governed homeowners associations. The records arrived within 48 hours. What they revealed was staggering. For 7 years, Karen had operated the HOA as her personal fiefdom. Funds allocated for community improvements had been diverted to administrative expenses without itemization. Fines collected from homeowners, many based on fabricated violations, had been placed in a reserve fund that showed numerous withdrawals with no corresponding expenditures. Most damning was the record of the barn itself. There was no mention in any HOA document of community usage rights. In fact, 3 years earlier, Karen had attempted to have the structure condemned as unsafe, only to be overruled by historical preservation regulations. Meanwhile, my security cameras captured Karen and her friends making 3 more attempts to access the barn, testing doors and windows under the pretense of property inspection. Each incident was documented and added to my growing file. Through careful conversations with neighbors, I learned that Karen's influence extended beyond the HOA. Her brother-in-law worked in the county permitting office. Her close friend was a local real estate agent who had threatened to blacklist properties when owners challenged Karen's authority. She wants control, Sarah observed as we reviewed my findings. This is not about rules or property values. This is about power. After 4 weeks of investigation, I submitted a formal complaint to the County Housing Authority and the State Real Estate Commission. I included financial records, witness statements, and video evidence, all meticulously organized and documented in the way I had been trained to prepare federal cases. The response was swift. 2 county investigators appeared at Karen's door the following Tuesday. From our kitchen window, we watched her expression change from smug confidence to tight-lipped anger as they presented their credentials. That evening, emergency notices appeared in everyone's mailbox. An urgent HOA meeting was called for Friday night. The notice, signed by Karen, claimed outside agitators were attempting to undermine our community standards and urged all residents to stand united against these threats. But the neighborhood was changing. People who had hurried past our house now stopped to talk. Families who had avoided us invited us to dinner. The fear was lifting as word spread that someone had finally challenged the Queen. Karen made one final attempt to regain control. Flyers appeared on doorsteps warning about a dangerous federal agent living in Oak Ridge Estates who was under investigation for misconduct. The accusations were vague but threatening. At the emergency meeting that Friday, the community center was packed. Karen stood at the front, prepared to rally her troops. But before she could speak, an elderly woman named Ruth Davis stood up. "I have lived in this neighborhood for 22 years, she announced in a wavering voice. And for the last 7, I have been afraid to plant roses because they were the wrong color, according to Karen. I have paid fines for violations that never existed. I have watched good neighbors leave because of harassment. She turned to face the crowd. And I am not afraid anymore. The room was silent. Then another person stood, and another, each with a story of intimidation, of arbitrary rules, of fear. Karen's face grew paler with each testimony. Her empire was crumbling before her eyes. The official HOA hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. County investigators had requested the meeting be held in the larger community room at the local library rather than the usual space, a clear indication of the seriousness of the situation. I arrived 30 minutes early with Sarah, carrying a leather portfolio containing organized evidence. My lawyer, Patricia Menendez, accompanied us. She specialized in HOA disputes and had been instrumental in helping me prepare the case properly. The room filled quickly. Nearly every homeowner in Oak Ridge Estates was present, their faces a mixture of apprehension and hope. At precisely 7 o'clock, Karen entered, flanked by two women I recognized as her closest allies. Her expression was composed, confident, the look of someone who had weathered challenges before and emerged victorious. The meeting was called to order by a county housing representative, not by Karen, the first sign that normal protocols had been suspended. He explained that serious allegations had been raised regarding the administration of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA and that this hearing would address those concerns. Karen immediately stood. "This is an internal matter that should be handled by our established procedures," she insisted. "Outside interference undermines our community autonomy." "Ms. Winters," the representative replied, "when allegations involve financial impropriety and possible violations of state housing statutes, county oversight is not only appropriate but required." For the next hour, the case unfolded methodically. Financial records displayed on a projector showed clear discrepancies. Testimonies from former board members established a pattern of intimidation and rule manipulation. Security footage showed Karen's unauthorized entry into my barn and her false claims to the sheriff. Throughout the presentation, Karen attempted to interject, to reframe evidence, to dismiss witnesses as disgruntled or incompetent. But each time, her explanations were contradicted by documentation. When the county investigator stood to present his preliminary findings, the room fell silent. "Based on our review," he stated, "we have identified numerous violations of state HOA regulations, including failure to hold proper elections, financial reporting deficiencies, and improper use of authority. Most concerning are the financial irregularities totaling approximately $48,000 over the past 5 years that cannot be accounted for through legitimate HOA expenses." Karen's face flushed deep red. "That is absurd. Every expense was approved by the board." "A board?" my lawyer interjected. "That consisted of you, your sister, and your neighbor who moved away 3 years ago but mysteriously continued to vote in absentia." Murmurs rippled through the audience. The county representative continued. "Additionally, we have documentation of at least 17 cases where fines were levied against homeowners for violations that are not actually present in the filed HOA covenant." "They were amendments," Karen snapped. "Amendments require a 2/3 majority vote of all homeowners," the representative countered. "We have no record of such votes occurring." As the evidence mounted, Karen's composure began to crack. Her responses became increasingly erratic, her explanations more implausible. When the security footage of her illegal entry into my barn played on the projector, followed by the contrasting 911 call where she claimed assault, several homeowners gasped audibly. "That is taken out of context," she shouted, standing so abruptly that her chair toppled backward. "He is manipulating you all. Do you know who he really is? What he does? He is a government agent sent to infiltrate our community." The room fell silent at her outburst. The wild accusation hung in the air, demonstrating more clearly than any evidence could the instability of her leadership. "Ms. Winters," the county representative said calmly, "I believe we have heard enough." The vote that followed was merely a formality. By unanimous decision, Karen was removed from the HOA board effective immediately. A temporary oversight committee would be established until proper elections could be held. The financial irregularities would be further investigated by the appropriate authorities. As Karen was escorted from the room, her face twisted with rage, she pointed at me. "This is not over," she hissed. "You will regret this." I said nothing. I did not need to. The truth had spoken loudly enough. Within 2 weeks, Karen Winters listed her house for sale. The "for sale" sign appeared overnight, and moving trucks arrived shortly after. She left without saying goodbye to anyone, without the customary neighborhood farewell gathering that usually marked departures from Oak Ridge Estates. According to Tom Johnson, she had accepted a position in a community 3 counties away. Apparently they were looking for an experienced HOA president, he said with a wry smile. They have no idea what is coming. The transformation of our neighborhood was remarkable. Gardens bloomed with previously unauthorized flowers. Fences were repaired. Children played freely on front lawns without parents anxiously checking for Karen's approach. The newly elected HOA board, led by Ruth Davis and Tom Johnson, immediately passed reforms limiting the powers of any single member. Financial decisions now required multiple approvals and transparent reporting. Violations needed photographic evidence and citation of specific covenant sections. Most importantly, a mediation process was established for disputes before any fines could be issued. My barn, once the center of controversy, became a genuine gathering place, not through force or false claims, but through community choice. When Ruth asked if we would consider hosting the annual neighborhood picnic in the restored space, Sarah and I happily agreed. The event was everything a community gathering should be: children playing tag around the property, neighbors bringing homemade dishes, elderly residents sharing stories with young families. There was laughter, music, and a palpable sense of relief. "You know," Tom said as we stood watching the celebration, "we tried for years to stand up to her, but we were all afraid of becoming targets." "Sometimes it takes an outsider," I replied, "someone who has not been conditioned to fear." "Or someone with particular skills," Ruth added with a knowing smile. "Word gets around, you know. Homeland Security, was it?" I shrugged. That was another life. As the summer progressed, our house truly became a home. Sarah planted her garden without fear of violation notices. I completed the barn renovation, adding a workshop area and a comfortable gathering space with a small kitchen. We hosted movie nights, invited neighbors for dinner, and finally experienced the peace we had sought when moving here. I remained vigilant, of course. Old habits die hard. I still maintained security cameras, still kept records of important conversations, still watched for potential threats. But the anxiety that had marked our first months slowly faded. One evening, as Sarah and I sat on our porch watching fireflies dance across the lawn, Ruth Davis stopped by with her husband. "We never properly thanked you," she said, settling into a rocking chair, "for what you did for all of us." "I just wanted a peaceful place to live," I replied. "You know," her husband said, "folks still wonder about your background, government agent and all that, very mysterious." I smiled. Homeland Security, retired now. I looked out at the quiet street, at children riding bikes without fear, at neighbors chatting across fences. But that title never really mattered much. Being a good neighbor, that matters more. Sarah reached over and took my hand, squeezing gently. Later that night, as we prepared for bed, she asked, "Do you miss it? The excitement, the importance of your old work?" I thought about the years of stress, the constant vigilance, the weight of responsibility. Then I thought about our barn filled with laughing neighbors, our garden flourishing in the summer sun, the simple pleasure of belonging. "No," I said truthfully, "I found something better. Some battles are fought with weapons and tactics, others with patience and truth. The most important victories are not the ones that make headlines, but the ones that bring peace to the places we call home."